Alright, this happened to me about 3 years ago. It was brought up recently with my friends and they suggested that I post it here. I've gone through therapy for this and trained in firearms because this was the creepiest night of my life. I spent a night in what felt like a horror movie and it's still so vivid. It was a Wednesday night in the summer. I was off work, my husband was out of town and our son was staying at his grandma's for the night. I was home alone with my dogs, an 80-pound Aussie mix and my 80-pound German Shepherd. I always have issues sleeping when I'm home alone, so I tend to just binge watch TV in the living room until I can't keep my eyes open anymore. This particular night, I remembered that the trash pickup comes the next day. I decided to turn on Game of Thrones for a bit, then I would take the trash out. All of a sudden, I realised it's 1:30 AM and I still haven't taken the trash to the curb. My house has 2 solid iron gates, one in the front and one to the side door/backyard. Lighting on our street, or anywhere in our neighbourhood, isn't that great, but it's a quiet neighbourhood with a lot of families, and you rarely hear about crime here. I looked out the window by habit before I took the trash out and saw who I thought was my neighbour, smoking a cigarette outside of his gate across the street, looking directly at me. For context, this is a normal occurrence. My neighbour across the street hides smoking cigarettes from his wife, so he typically does it late at night in front of his gate. I get off of work late, so I usually see him and we wave, say hi, chat a little, and then I go inside and he makes a joke. "You don't see me smoking," my wife asks. So unbothered by seeing the guy, I go outside, grab my trash cans, open my squeaky iron gate and take them out to the curb. I didn't have my glasses on at the time, so as usual I waved and said hello. However, the guy who I thought was my neighbour threw down the cigarette and quickly walked off down the street. It took a minute for me to register that he was not my neighbour. I was a little creeped out because he was clearly staring to my window from the opposite sidewalk, but also maybe it was a guy taking a night walk, not unusual in our neighbourhood, and just stopped for a cigarette. I thought I probably weirded him out as much as he weirded me out, went back inside and laid on the couch with my dogs to keep watching Game of Thrones. At some point I fell asleep and woke up hearing my gate squeak and my German Shepherd growling. He's extremely protective of our family home, but he's also the kind of dog you can take anywhere because he's so friendly in public. My Aussie is more passive, but his sheer size and scary bark tends to deter people. It's very friendly though. I quickly got up and pulled back my curtain. My gate was still shut and I didn't see anything. My dog, however, continues to growl at the front door. I looked out another window which has a better view of the front yard and porch. I didn't see anything. Eventually my dog settled back down with my other dog, but I was still uneasy. I ended up watching TV again because I couldn't go back to sleep. About an hour later, I definitely heard my gate squeak. We're the only ones with a heavy cast iron gate and the noise it makes is so distinct. So, I look out the curtain while my dog's continuing to softly growl. My gate's halfway open but I don't see anyone. At this point, I'm panicking. In my panic, I couldn't find my phone. I grabbed my wooden baseball bat out of our room, crouched down and started going through the couch cushions to get my phone. My dogs are oddly still quietly growling instead of barking, so I assume no one was there. The minute I find my phone, my front door handle starts shaking. I run to the side door to let my German Shepherd out. I know he'll protect me and he can jump the 6-foot black gate. My Aussie, going crazy, bursts out one of the doors. I heard the guy say, "Oh shit," and immediately I let out my German Shepherd. I jumped up to look out the window. I saw my dog latch onto the guy's hand. The guy starts screaming and takes off down the street, my dog chasing him. I then became terrified he'd hurt my dog, so I ran down with my baseball bat, screaming my dog's name over and over. The next thing I know, my dog is prancing down the street back to me, happy as shit with blood all over his face. I called the police. They took another hour or so to show up and didn't seem to take me too seriously. They said they'd call the local hospitals, but I never heard back. I called my husband bawling, and he got on the next flight home. I stayed at his mum's for a few days, too terrified to go home. I did buy my dogs giant ribeyes for being so good and saving me. I don't know what that guy wanted, but since then I've been trained in firearms and self-defense. So, creepy guy, let's not meet again because my dog might finish the job he started. I think I have a stalker. Well, had one. I'm an Israeli high school student. I have long brown hair, I'm 179 centimeters tall, and I weigh 68 kilos. My encounter started in October of 2022 on a Jewish holiday called Yom Kippur. It translates to Day of Repentance. Basically, it's just a day when Jews go to the synagogue to repent for their sins, fast, and don't use any electricity. On Yom Kippur, teens usually go to the town square and just chill there, meet new people and talk. So being bored, I chose to go along with my peers in the hopes of meeting new people. Of these new people, I've met a girl, let's call her Emma. I met Emma through mutual friends. She goes to another school in a different town and doesn't often stay in mine as her parents are divorced and her mum has custody of her in the other town, while her dad lives in the same town as me. The best description of her is 150 centimeters tall and 50 kilograms soaking wet, with this kind of fusion between ginger and blonde hair, an inverted triangle face shape, and she has a distinct piercing look to her teal greenish eyes. We talked a bit, she was shy and socially awkward. I made up some bullshit excuse about my parents wanting me home as it was getting late. Before I left, she asked my Instagram. I'm fairly active on social media, mostly posting comedic stories, just low effort jokes people seem to like. I've always noticed that she always views my stories first, coincidence maybe, but it seems to be seconds after I post them. I suspected that maybe she had notifications on, but it was probably just my ego. She responded to a lot of them. She had texted in a flirty kind of way with a lot of heart emojis and the such. I got a creepy vibe but assumed she was joking. Around December was the first time she tried to meet up with me. She persuaded me, but I didn't crack under peer pressure, so I kept with the bullshit excuses. Around mid-January, she started texting me on WhatsApp. I never gave her my number, but it was safe to assume one of our mutuals gave it to her. A bit creepy, but whatever. There are a few phone calls that I missed because I was busy. She kept proceeding with the inappropriate jokes, and I started to ignore her more, usually responding with one-word answers to texts. She started to get pissy, but I hoped that just shutting her out would be the best way to proceed, as she will eventually get the hint. In February, she crossed a line, a big line. Out of the blue, she just texted me the name of my street and a number. To try and throw her off my tail, I just responded with a question mark. She followed up by telling me, "That's where you live." Ex-friend's name. Told me you're afraid of me. That's not true, is it? Being freaked the fuck out, I just left her on red, hoping everything would go away. In the meantime, I tried to figure out how she got the address. Following some digging online, it was the address that showed up after searching for my father's full name, a name that I never told her. She texted me again a few days later, asking me to let her come over. I told her to leave me alone. She tried to convince me to take her out on a date. I told her that I'm gay. She called me every homophobic slur in the book, some of which I'd never heard before, which is impressive. I told my friend about it and he later sent me a screenshot of her private story, showing her crying and talking about how all the men are evil and such, asking if this was related to me. It probably was. The following morning she sent me a voice message from a different account, telling me how much she was sorry and that she loves me. I told her again, I'm gay. You're nice and all, but I'm simply not interested. Silence. Have I reached peace at last? It's been a few days without hearing from her and all was good, and I quickly forgot of her existence. Around a week after the whole incident happened, my mum was supposed to drive me to school, but when we got in the car, we noticed that the tyre was punctured. I had a bad feeling about it. In hindsight, I realised that my dog barked maniacally the night before, but I assumed it was just me being delusional, and that those were just coincidences. For the following days, I had a sinking feeling that something was wrong. I felt as if I was watched when I was following routines, such as going to the gym or walking the dog. I thought I saw her at the mall, but there are only 2 malls in my town, so that's unlikely. She didn't seem to notice me. It was early March at that point, my birthday. A day before my birthday, I got a flower bouquet delivered to me along with balloons and a note saying, I love you. No clue from whom, but I didn't bother to ask the delivery guy and I guess it was just my friends fucking with me. They knew I was on edge, but now I'm not so sure it was them. For my birthday, I decided to get drunk with my friends. I take antidepressants, so I often don't get shit-faced when I drink, only mildly drunk. The parents of my friend who lives 20 minutes away were on vacation, so he was the host. I posted some pics to my stories of just us messing around in his front yard. We made too much noise and the cops were called, so we had to cut it short. Walking back home, I felt paranoid. I get a bit worried when I drink, but I tried to ignore the thoughts. There was a woman who kept a short distance behind me, but again, I ignored my gut and assumed it was a coincidence. I stopped on my walk and went to some shrubbery because I just had to bath. I felt my hair being pulled into a ponytail. It was the lady. She held the hair for me. She told me to sit down and wait a bit before I continue. I listened to her and sat down cross-legged with my face looking down. I had my face down out of shame, and because I was afraid I'd suddenly puke all over her if I raised my face. I caught a few glimpses and she seemed familiar. Her voice was soothing and oddly familiar. She was pretty touchy, but I didn't overthink it, as I was a bit out of my senses. She was getting a bit too touchy-feely and started moving her hand towards my nether regions, and I finally had to tell her to stop. I looked her in the face and tried to make her stop when suddenly I figured out who she was. I assume I probably knew her as a neighbour or a peer. It clicked. It was Emma. The eyes gave her away. I tried to get up, but I couldn't. I was too dizzy. She touched my shoulder and I slapped her hand away and told her to leave me alone. She put her hand under my chin and that was it. I don't remember why, but I reflexively punched her. It was just one punch with the weak power of a drunk man, but a punch is a punch. She backed off and I just apologised and stumbled away. I cried on the walk home. I'm a pacifist. I'm strictly anti-violence. Never punched another person, and it's strictly against my morals to punch a woman. I still feel guilty about it. I got a message from an unknown number telling me I'm a dead man, but ever since then nothing has happened. I'm still paranoid, guilty, and disgusted by myself. It's nearly June, I haven't heard from her since March, but I still can't let it go. So Emma, let's not meet again. This story happened a few months ago. At that time, I had moved out of my house for a professional reason, but I had to wait a couple of months before moving on to my next house. Since I can work from anywhere, I rented my very close friend Amy's family holiday house, which is otherwise empty and located in a village I grew up in the countryside. I've known this family and their house very well since I was a small child. The house is rather large. It has 2 floors and 5 bedrooms. It is located in a quiet or even remote area of the village, only surrounded by forest and other empty holiday houses. While planning this, I was aware the setting could be scary, being a single 27-year-old female, but I hate to restrain myself in life because of unjustified fears, so I instead took a few measures to feel more safe. Before moving in, I had planned to complete a full check of all the doors and windows. Once done, I would look into every room, under every bed, and inside all the wardrobes. This way I could be certain that the house was perfectly empty and would stay so, as I'll be very careful with closing doors and I knew there were no spare keys. So that, when at night, when I would be scared, I could reason with myself and know that it was only in my head. I was accompanied by my mother to do this check, as she lives close by. We faced a problem rather quickly while verifying doors and windows. 2 glass doors from the enclosed patio were malfunctioning and someone could just slide them open. The layout of the 2 doors was the following. One was looking towards the garden, the second one was between the patio and the rest of the house. This meant someone could not only get inside the patio from outside, but also into the rest of the house. After this discovery, I called my friend Amy and we agreed I would find a locksmith. Amy's family's financial situation isn't at its peak, so depending on the price, either only the door leading to the garden would get fixed or both doors would get fixed. But the price was reasonable, thus the locksmith lady could change both locks. The patio was then perfectly sealed. However, according to her, the glass door leading to the garden was weak and one could easily open it if motivated. But since the glass door between the patio and the rest of the house was safe, I did not mind that remark. One could have as much fun as they pleased in that patio as long as I was safe in my house. After that and a successful second checkup, I was happy to move in. The first few days were a bit scary, but since I was careful with doors and the house's surroundings were so peaceful and lovely, it quickly became bliss to live there. I was heating myself with the fireplace, eating good food, breathing fresh air. I felt very free and happy. Only I noticed a small odd detail in the very first few days. A 3rd glass door was not locking anymore. I got very surprised since I checked so carefully every single door during my checkup. This door was right next to the one I got repaired, between the patio and the house. So this meant that the patio was not perfectly sealed anymore. But fine, I thought. All the doors leading to outside were still locked, so no need to worry. I quickly moved on since I felt so happy there. I didn't want any useless fear to bother me. I came to the conclusion that I must have missed it, and I was a bit ashamed that I got Amy's family to spend money on 2 locks whereas it should have been 3, because of my carelessness. After 2 wonderful months living a dream, mostly on my own, since all my childhood friends had moved from the village, a friend came to visit me. We spent some time outside, and we had a drink at my place before I drove him back to his village about an hour away. While we were leaving my house, he even emphasised how meticulous I was with closing all the shutters behind us. I told him it was key for me to feel so comfortable there. I was back home at around 10 PM. I entered my perfectly sealed house and locked the door behind me. While turning the key, out of the blue, suddenly intense goosebumps ran all over my scalp. I had never experienced such a feeling, and I was not even aware that the human body could get goosebumps on the scalp. With that came a very instinctive feeling of danger and being on my guard. I felt all this so intensely that I was not able to ignore it, yet I knew that my house was perfectly closed. So I stayed cautious, but I walked through the entrance and came to the kitchen. Here, on the floor, laid a rectangular plastic bag. It was small and blue on the orange floor. I was surprised. I recognized it as being a plastic bag to be filled with water to make ice cubes. It had no reason to be here. I had already seen these bags earlier when I was looking for freezer bags to put my food in, and I mistook them. I knew they were stored in a drawer at the very other side of the kitchen, and I knew that we did not use them nor anything from that drawer with my friend earlier. This uncanny discovery confirmed my gut feeling, and I began to feel very uneasy. I sent a picture to my friend asking if he'd touched or used these. He said, "No, keep me in touch." I grabbed a knife and I started walking into the living room. Usually, whenever I would feel afraid in the house, I would go on a little check-up tour in every room to reassure myself. That is what I had in mind at that moment, but this gut feeling was literally forbidding my body to do so. Instead, it walked me out of the house. I drove to my mother's place and slept there. A few days later, during a sunny afternoon, my mother and I came back and checked the house thoroughly. Nothing was missing nor broken, and no one was there. Everything stayed exactly as I had left it. With such evidence, I came to the conclusion it must have been my friend who, by accident, took those bags out and forgot about it. Then they must have fallen on the floor while I had opened the door, or something like that. I came back in and kept living a dream in this beautiful place for another month after that. Then something else happened. For a few days I had been hearing unusual noises which began to scare me, so I decided it was time for a checkup. It was around 9 PM and I began going in every room looking under every bed. Downstairs, all clear. I walked upstairs, opened the first bedroom, and surprised, the light was on. This caused me to flinch a little. I never go to these rooms upstairs and they remain closed at all times. Nevertheless, I walked towards the wardrobe. But before opening it, I got a second flinch as an unknown object is now laying on top of the furniture. I open, nobody, I close. And then I look at the object. It is an elongated black fabric sheath, rather big, with a hook to carry it on a belt. A terrifying idea crosses my mind that it may be a knife sheath, but I brush it off as I don't need my imagination to get crazy in such a situation. I finished my checkup, but despite nobody being found, I could not help but feeling weird about the sheath and the light. I went to sleep at my mother's place that night too. The day after, I checked with my friend Amy. No family member came into the house while I was away, nor do they recognise the object as belonging to any of them. I dropped it at the police station, and according to them, is likely a hunting knife sheath indeed. Then, I started thinking again about the patio's third door. It had been coming into my mind for some weeks, but I've been dismissing the idea to avoid unnecessary fear. Reflecting back on my thorough entrance checkup, it's very unlikely that I would have missed a door. As well, the locksmith had changed the lock of the door right next to this one. He even stared at it to see how a well-functioning lock should look like. With Amy, we had first imagined that an old Airbnb tenant could have made a copy of the keys and the locks to be changed. But more and more, I was sure the person was coming in the house from the patio. Another locksmith came and looked at the third door's lock. She said, "Ah yes, indeed." The lock part screwed onto the door frame, where the lock embeds itself, had been screwed off. She also checked the door leading to the garden her colleague had pointed out as easy to open. She said, "Ah yes, that's obvious, ah yes." Meaning in her laconic way there was very little chance of all that to be a coincidence. I left the house for good after that. I believe a person had the little habits in this house, using the way I shut when I arrived, and they made sure to be able to reach inside the place despite my changes. Thinking that all this time I was living my life peacefully, reasoning with myself not to be scared, that the place was safe and locked, it actually was not.